every time you level up, right? And all of a sudden you have new challenges and you have to level up your mental game even further. And as you know, in the world of sports, as you move up those ladders, the things that used to separate you in terms of whether the physical attributes or the talent, all of a sudden those don't separate you anymore, right? And once you get to those upper echelons of high performance sports, the mental game is really what starts to separate those athletes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to A Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices in the industries of health, wealth, and relationships. We talk to some of our clients here at Leader and understand the journey that they've taken to get their message out to the world, grow their business, and authentically spread their message in hopes to reaching you all, not only to give you valuable insights from a different point of view, but also help anyone out there that wants to get their message or mastery out to the world. Our hopes is you hear these people's story and it lights something up in you. Today, we're actually talking sports. We're talking sports mindset. We're talking to Coach Jay, Jason Sousa, who is a member of our Inner Circle program. He is a mindset and performance coach for athletes, from professionals, Olympians, collegiate athletes, and youth from various sports. He helps athletes elevate their mind to elevate their performance and life. He's a former collegiate and professional athlete, as well as an NCAA coach. He is familiar with the mental struggles that come with high-performance sports. Known as Coach J to his athletes, he holds a master's degree in education with a focus in sports, including master's thesis on athletic development. He also holds certifications in mental performance mastery and neuroscience coaching. It was such a fun conversation today. We talk about how important our language is, not only as these young athletes, but as their parents and as coaches. I'm excited for my young boy to play sports if that's what he chooses. And what I took away of how I can help and where I need to temper myself from Coach Jay was absolutely awesome. He talks about how greatness is in us, and all we have to do is use sports as a way to express it. He talks about what it means to be kind of at the forefront of speaking about sports mindset and how it wasn't always the case for him, how he had to learn the hard way to come back and then help young kids. So you're really going to like this. Feel free to watch all the way through. And if you like it, subscribe, and leave comments to tell us what you like about it or what you don't like about it. I know I need to cut my beard. It needs a trim. But we're going to dive in. Before we do, this podcast, as always, is brought to you by Leader, our company who has mastered the art of getting your authentic message out to the world, whether through speaking or business building. We have helped thousands of people land physical and virtual stages, over 600 TEDx talks worldwide, hundreds of others on virtual and physical stages around the world. And we've helped people sustainably start and scale their business so they can create an impact. Jason Sousa is one of them. What he's done is incredible with his business. Multiple $20,000, $30,000 months with this program that is doing the world good and young athletes good. We hope you really like it. I'm going to shut up and kick it over to, well, me. You get it. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to A Matter of Speaking podcast. Today, we're talking health, mental health, specifically with sports, with Coach Jason Sousa. Jason, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am excited as a athlete myself, as someone that cares about mindset. We're talking to a sports mindset coach specifically for young athletes, correct?
All the way from young athletes right to professional level.
Because that's your background. Your background is former collegiate athlete and professional athlete and NCAA coach?
Correct. That's correct.
And what was the soccer?
Soccer, yeah. Soccer is the sport that I played. I'm a big sports guy overall. I love all sports, but soccer is where I found my passion and my way to collegiate sports.
Perfect. In the comments, anybody watching it, we can make fun of them a little bit for playing soccer. That's okay. We know hockey's a little bit better. No, it makes what position in soccer?
Center midfield.
Yeah, all the running. This will be fun, man. Okay, so that was and your coaching, all of your NCAA coaching was soccer as well?
It was, yeah. So the opportunity to go back and coach at the NCAA level while doing my master's, and I was fortunate to do my master's in education with a focus in sports. And so, that was a phenomenal experience, both coaching and getting my education at the same time.
Yeah, man. Where at?
Lemoyne College, which is now a Division I soccer program that is in Central New York.
Wow, man, congratulations. That is awesome. Now, the student athletes you work with all the way through, like you said, young all the way up, across all sports, though, correct? It's not just soccer.
That's correct.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited to pick your brain on that. But I like to ask. Typically, the first question I like to ask, man, is I, sports mindset. I don't know about you. I feel like it's starting to gain traction as of just recently. Like it hasn't always been a thing. So you're kind of at the front edge of getting this message out there. I like to call it leading voice. I think that's a badge of honor for Jason Sousa, Coach Jay. What does it mean to be a leading voice in your industry of sports mindset?
Yeah, great question. And you're right, it is relatively new. For me, being a leading voice is you understand that there's a better way for a group of people, and you're willing to be that voice to lead that movement, that change. And
Mm.
for me, that means getting uncomfortable and learning and developing yourself to be able to be that leading voice.
Yeah, man. Because I think when you're the leading voice, you could one be the person that people rally behind. You can also be the person that people throw rocks at. Have you, as you start to put yourself out there, have you got a taste of both, or has it been overwhelmingly one way?
It has been mostly positive, but for sure, whenever you're putting yourself out there, and I quickly learned that the term what internet trolls, I think, is
Yeah,
the term, right?
yeah.
So when you put yourself out there, and it doesn't, for me, it isn't about having to overcome that. It's when you realize that you are having a huge impact, and the outreaches that you get from parents and athletes in terms of how impactful some of the information is that I've been sharing with them. I mean, that's the thing that just keeps you going.
Man, it would have been weird. It is kind of weird for me to hear there are trolls out there, which just goes to show you if anyone's looking to get a message out, there's going to be trolls no matter what, even if someone that wants to help your child's mindset with sports. Because I grew up, it's like we called them the basket cases. Like the some kids where it's like their mind can just take huge dips, and they're in this chasm. I absolutely love what you do, but and if I'm projecting, please stop me here. I imagine getting into sports mindset. Your history is first with sports. Mindset probably came a little bit later, or was mindset kind of always in the forefront, even when you started playing soccer at a young age?
No, no. In fact, I would say, assuming you and I played youth sports around the same time, back in our time, we'd often see an athlete, and if they were talented but they lacked the mental side, we would say he or she is talented, but they don't have it mentally.
Yeah.
They would almost just get completely discarded, right? And the reality is they just don't have it mentally yet because we haven't taught them those mental skills.
Hmm.
And that's where, as you mentioned, this is relatively new in terms of us identifying what those mental skills are and how we teach it to these young athletes. But in terms of mindset, how I kind of came into this particular field, when I got drafted to the professional level, I mean, that's everything I had wanted. I wanted to get to the professional level. That was my long-term goal. And I thought, okay, I made it. This is, from here on out, it's all going to be, exactly as I imagined. But the reality was I fell short and I wasn't prepared, and I dealt with a lot of the mental blocks, and it wasn't for a lack of desire, a lack of talent. And I thought at that time I had just hit a ceiling, and perhaps this is it for me. But it wasn't until much later on where I started to really educate myself in terms of athletic development, as I wanted to get into a coach and really started to dive into this, to the mental piece of it. And I dove right into it. And at some point, it was just a light bulb moment. It was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I needed at
Hmm.
that time. And this wasn't really there. There was no real coaches, or no one was really talking about this. We just assumed that athletes were going to figure this out on their own, and I didn't. And so for me, since that time, I've really taken the time to really educate myself and become very familiar with the workings of the mind, and to try to be the coach that I needed at that time for those that I work with.
It's so interesting, man. Like I say it, hockey guys might be dicks about this, but we would just say, dude, this guy's a basket case. That was the word that we use. You talk about having it, but the mental skills weren't there. And almost getting to a point when you get to your professional career where there was a ceiling. Would you say, though, at a young age, young Coach Jason playing soccer, would you say that you both had it and the mental skills, or do you think that it was a challenge even at a young age for you?
Great question. I believe we all, through that journey, there may be times where you have it mentally, but the way the workings of the mind, there's going to be those moments of doubt and the questions and the fears, and that's part of the sports journey, as you know, and you probably experienced that as well.
Hmm.
And I think for different athletes, from my experience, those mental blocks become more more evident on different places. And so for some like myself, it really happened at the professional level. Some happens earlier. And
Hmm.
now with the change of the youth sports landscape, it's happening at a really early age, unfortunately. And so it really depends on the athlete, just like speed or strength. Some naturally have a stronger mindset, and some they need a little bit more work.
Yeah, because it is interesting. The first when you were telling me of your progression, what's coming across to me is like, man, that bar gets raised. That mental skills bar gets raised differently. I would imagine based on the level that you're at, based on the arena that you're in, and based on like your own life ventures. I mean, we go through puberty, then you're going through all this shit when you're in your 20s, and like then you're wanting to have kids, and you're trying to balance all this. So it's like that mental skills bar is constantly raised for people. It's not something that, hey, they conquered it at a young age, so they always have it. It's consistency with it. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a work in progress, no doubt. And every time you level up, right, and all of a sudden you have new challenges, and you have to level up your mental game even further. And as you know, in the world of sports, as you move up those ladders, the things that used to separate you in terms of whether the physical attributes or the talent, all of a sudden those don't separate you anymore,
Hmm.
right? And once you get to those upper echelons of high performance sports, the mental game is really what starts to separate those athletes.
This is gonna be a weird. It's not a brag, but a weird personal story with it. It's like I feel as a hockey goalie, which mental completely.
It speaks volumes in itself.
Thank you very much. I feel like there is times where my mental skills have lessened, and I'm going to play men's league versus because when I was growing up, because you have like the 30-year-olds that are drinking beer just berating you, and after a while, I get frustrated. I think it's something that it's cool to look at the sports, the athletic mindset this way. It's like anybody could use this. It's not kids, not professional, but anyone that loves sport, loves the competitive nature, should probably have this arsenal.
Yeah, and not just athletes. I would say, what I've really learned is that a lot of the things that I teach for my athletes, this would really resonate to almost anyone.
Yeah.
Really, why I do it with athletes is because you and I are no longer athletes, but for whatever reason, we still resonate as athletes, don't we? It
Yes.
never goes away.
Yes.
That's the thing about athletes, right? They always think they're still athletes.
I was about to
Um,
say, speak for yourself, man. Maybe
yeah,
you.
but with athletes, one, I understand the mindset of an athlete. I understand that desire, and the other component of that is, with young athletes or athletes, they understand they want to get better at their sport now, and so that level of coachability, that level of, I want to understand this, and I want to level up, is there, and so I can use that passion that they have for sports as the vehicle to really teach a lot of the stuff that I know, and that's why I work with athletes. Plus, athletes, as you know, they're fun to work with. We can joke around and have a completely different relationship.
Yeah, it's like there's a buy-in of them just playing a sport for something like this. But you did say something interesting earlier because I was curious, like, sports mindset is new as of recent. And a lot of people could say, oh, okay, this new age is whether you say more woke or more mentally attuned or aware. But you also talk about in a lot of your content that like the dropout rate is like going way up for young athletes now. What do you think has been the biggest difference between professional and youth athletes back then versus professional and youth athletes now?
Yeah, great question. In regards to the professional athletes, for the professional athletes, there's a lot more distractions that they have to deal with now than past
Yeah.
professionals, right? Especially with the age of social media, and so that certainly changes a lot of things for these professional athletes. And now this younger generation is growing up in that in terms of their development, so that's a challenge for sure. But the biggest change from the youth level, I would say, is that there's this concept that we professionalize youth sports, right? And so now we are starting to train these younger athletes like professionals, and we have all these big competitions, and we have these high expectations on the young athletes. And now all of a sudden, what used to be mental blocks for athletes much later on are happening at the younger ages because of the level of expectations that we put on. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that parents are paying a lot of money for youth sports.
Mm,
And so what's happened is now the youth sports is no longer catering to young athletes. We're catering to the paying customer, which is the parents. And when the parents are paying that much, they want to get a return on their investment. And sport the development of an athlete is slow,
yeah.
But parents are like, I'm paying this money, I need to see a return on my investment now, and they attach that to outcomes, winning, right? If my team's winning, then at least I know. And so now we've gone from development to winning, and that's created a whole bunch of mental issues for these young athletes, and it's not their fault. We're letting them down.
Yeah, man, I feel like capitalism should be balanced with patience. And when it's not, it's like you really can screw this system up. But one of the things you're saying is like youth athletes, more professional, more money basically equals more pressure. And it's got to get to a point where these kids just can't take it anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the statistics are roughly 70% of these kids will drop off at that age of about 13, 14. And majority of it is, they don't enjoy it anymore. They can't meet the expectations of their parents or their coaches. And it's unfortunate, right? Because I think you and I both know that regardless of what you go on to achieve in your sport, who you become in that process is so important.
Yep.
And we're not giving them that opportunity.
I don't think I would be the person I was if I didn't have the discipline is probably lack of better word that I gained from youth sports. Now with you working with young athletes though, like what's the biggest, because you're working with these young athletes almost as a third party, right? When you're their coach, you're somewhat invested because you also want to win and you're putting certain, like, when you're a parent or playing yourself, you're at a certain lens, but you're now just the mindset guy. So you can kind of see what they're doing from a third party. What have been some of the biggest learnings for you as a mindset coach?
Yeah, great question. The thing I noticed is that whether they're a professional or an Olympian or a collegiate athlete or a youth athlete, they all go through these spurts of doubt
Mm.
and questions and having to overcome fear and making the mistake of making those comparisons. And so regardless of where you are, the mind has interesting ways of taking control and making you doubt yourself, right? And so if you don't know the inner workings of the mind, it's very easy to get trapped into these situations. So for professionals all the way down, regardless, you see the same patterns.
You and I have talked, obviously, as you grow your business. You told me some of this philosophy of like really getting to the root issues of the mind, right? You're obviously learning these kids, these adults, these professionals are all dealing with doubt. You used to be a coach, right? Now you're like the almost like a trainer. If you were to go back, I don't know if you still coach, but if you were to go back, would your coaching philosophy change? If so, how?
For sure, yeah. Even from the perspective of how we speak to the kids,
Mm,
right? And I'm very careful with the language that I use, because the language is very powerful, as you
mm,
know. Language, the words we use are not just descriptive; they're very creative.
mm,
And so even when we tell kids, things like, "Hey, we have to win this game," right? Now, when you say you have to, that means you cannot lose. The moment you say that, the kids no longer have choice. When they don't have choice, they don't have freedom. When they
mm.
don't have freedom, they cannot play freely. And we wonder why they play with all this level of tension, right? There's a big difference between you have to win as opposed to, hey, you absolutely can win today, which creates excitement and motivation, right? And so in terms of just even the language with which we use with these young athletes is so important.
Would you say then, like, I'm always curious. I start hearing you and I'm like, man, I want my buddies who are hockey coaches to listen to this, right? It's so easy to fall into that trap of like,
Sure.
we got to win this game, we have to win this game, and playing tight, like all of this vernacular makes sense, but to get more creative in language is so key to let these kids be free. What do you think across all sports? What do you think is the most concerning thing about young athletes and coaches for young athletes right now?
Just how much we have.
So I can make fun of my friends. Sorry, I was finish that.
I'm sure you have a lot of reasons to make fun of your friends. They're your friends. I
Yeah,
mean,
true.
that's enough. But in terms of just the overemphasis on outcomes in terms of the way that these kids determine their self-worth, right? And so a lot of that is, hey, if you're on this team or if you're winning this championship, that determines how good you are. We often ignore, that they're good enough to begin with. At the core, they're good enough, right? And they're using sports to grow further. But unfortunately, a lot of them are misidentified with the sport. They think that's who they are as opposed to what they do. And you can see how that starts to create a lot of mental issues. When you think you are a hockey player and things are not going well, it's easy to start spiraling.
Mm. So the team equals how good you are. The sport equals who you are. When it's like both of those should be answered outside of sports. And then what would you say? Sports is just a way to accentuate it a little bit more?
Sports for me, especially for someone who has that love, and I often say to the athletes, we say for a lot of these athletes, it's chasing greatness. And I look at it from a different perspective. It's like there's a seed of greatness in you, and you can utilize sports as an opportunity to nurture and grow that, right? But who you are at the core is good enough. You were good enough from day one. Sports is just an opportunity to grow even further.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit of what we were talking of the other day? It's like it almost sounds like a lot of what we look at with student athletes, young athletes, is like symptoms and not the root. I guess can you one elaborate a little bit more on that, and then two, how do you get to that root with a young kid?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started diving into this concept of mindset coaching and mental performance and getting certified, and there's a lot of great tools that we use. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a reset after a mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
An athlete makes a mistake and they're dwelling on it and they need a reset, and so we can give them a reset tool, but we are only putting a band-aid on this on the symptom, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is I'm dwelling on this mistake.
Yeah.
The root issue is, why do you have such a fear of making a mistake? And oftentimes it's because it just validates to them what they believe, which is I'm not good enough or I can't fail, right? And these are deeper rooted issues, which is really limiting the athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first started, I would begin by giving them tools, which I had learned. But the reality is we're giving their mind tools to fix the problems that the mind has created in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You understand that it opens your eyes, because it still ignores a fundamental truth, which is you are not your mind to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's a lot of what I do is not necessarily in terms of training the mind. And yes, there is going to be a concept of mental training, but the core of what I do is mental separation, right? Because within your mind lives a very limited version of your potential. And why? Because the mind is built for survival. And so it generates fears and it generates doubts and it does comparison and it holds stories of the past that hurt us, and it projects it to the future and our limiting beliefs, and a negative narrative is within there. But all of that is not who we are. And so once we make that separation and we say, hey, that's how your mind works. And I really show them how the mind works so they understand how these thoughts get generated. And now all of a sudden we start to raise their level of consciousness so that they become well aware of the things that are actually holding them back. Right. And if you think, I believe it's Einstein that said that you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that it was created. And so we are trying to give these kids tools, or athletes tools, to fix the mind at the same level of consciousness that they were created, and it's not having lasting impact. And that for me really changed the way that I coach these athletes.
Yeah. So, for instance, like the quick reset is more the band-aid, the same level of consciousness to which it exists, where you want to expand upon that and help these kids look at it differently. Man, correct?
Exactly it.
You're talking Einstein. It's like I'm hearing you, and I'm like, man, separating yourself, understand how consciousness and the mind works. I think like Alan Watts. I think of like Eckhart Tolle.
Exactly.
As a 33-year-old man, I'm like, dude, you're speaking my language. But it also brings into my mind like, can these kids, it might sound rude, can they grasp this? Like, at what age do you feel they're able to grasp what you and I are talking about right now?
That's a great question. And so, where I've had to really, you know, excel in my particular field is being able to take what is, relatively a complex idea and use the language that would resonate with young athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we look at it from, who's your opponent, and we start to look at the ways that the opponent works, right? In the mental game, if your opponent is the mind, you need to know how the game the mind is playing to win that game. And
Mm-hmm.
so we look at the workings of the opponent, and then we name it, right? So yesterday, for example, I have a young basketball player, and we are going through that process, and and we're talking about, what does that voice sound like to you, the one that tries to hold you back. And he came up with a name of Whiny Will, right? Whiny Will is always whining, right? And so he's like, Whiny Will, you just need to chill, I got this, right? And so we make it fun. We try to use language that these kids are going to understand. And so it's been a lot of work, but I've taken it to a place where it's really had a huge impact on these kids.
It's so fascinating. Like it's a skill, it's a mastery that you have to not only conceptualize this and know this, but then meet a kid where they're at and get them to put their language on it so it makes sense to them, right? Or, I mean, this is not to make fun of some of my friends, which I kind of will, but it's like my buddies that are coaching hockey, coaching basketball, they're not like, yeah, let's talk about consciousness and Eckhart, right? It's like even for them to be able to conceptualize this is huge, man. How long do you think it takes, working with you or in general, to get these foundations for young kids that last? I don't want to say permanently, but like close to permanently. How long do you think it actually takes?
Yeah, so for the majority of the athletes, within 90 days, we can start to really have a transformation. And then from there, it's about intentionally maintaining the work that we're doing and being very purposeful about continue to do the mental work. It's similar to the physical game, right? It's like you played hockey, right? You
Yeah.
didn't learn how to, slap a puck, the first time, and it's,
Mhm.
it's work, and you get better and you get better, and then you have those mess ups and you get better and you get better. It's the same with the mental game. But for the majority of athletes, they don't even understand how to start, right? They don't even know
Mhm.
where to start, and they don't even know how the game is played. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's showing them who their opponent, what the opponent is, the game that's being played, how you can win it, how you can train it, and then from there, making sure that you are intentional about continuously doing the work.
Yeah, so you're saying like couple of months, 90 days, 2, 3 months is to get these foundations down. And then after that, it's repetition and embedding for these
Exactly.
athletes.
Exactly.
That's fascinating, man. And just to have that, how much of a leg up a 13-year-old has to be able, it's like, this is high level stuff. Um, what's your big vision with this, man? It's like you're working with athletes across the board. What is Jason Sousa's big vision with what you're doing with young athletes and sports in general?
Yeah, I would say there's two of them. Number one is, given where we've gone with the youth sports culture, and I used to be a big advocate for trying to change that culture, and it's not going to change. That's a battle I don't think we're going to win. And so if we're not going to change the culture, then we need to make sure that we give these kids mental tools to be prepared for that culture, right? And so
Mhm.
making part of mental training, a standardized part of youth development, right? And introducing that with a lot of these sports organizations. It's not just how you do some of the physical skills. Here are some of the mental skills as well. And so they're well prepared to deal with the level of pressure and expectations and the challenges that come with this journey. And then the second part of that is to change how we coach some of these athletes at the higher level in terms of going from very surface level stuff to doing some deep transformation work, right? And I've seen it firsthand with the athletes that I work with when I changed from going from trying to train the mind to making that separation from the mind, and how much more powerful that was in terms of deep transformation, a long-term transformation. And so for me, having that movement of going from just here's some fixes to here's some transformation, for me, I would say those are the two big things that I'm really pushing in terms of my vision.
Yeah, and let me know if I'm wrong here in understanding that it's at a young age almost require these mindset skills at a young age. If the system's not changing, this needs to be added to it because it's a high pressure system. And then at a higher level, it's dedicating resources to actually be like full depth into mind. It's just part of the team. It's part of any team culture.
Yeah, yeah. For me, as I said, I used to do it the other way, and the transformation has really helped from the sense of, and I look at it from this, if we all live in this mental prison, right? That's where all of our fears, our doubts, and so for me, the mental training was we taken an athlete from a 5 by 5 prison and we gave them this mental training, and now you got a better mindset. So now you live in a 20 by 20 mental prison. It's big,
Yeah, yeah.
more comfortable.
Hmm.
Okay. But the real freedom happens when you walk out of that thing,
Yeah,
right? And that's
yeah.
completely different. And so that level of transformation that I've been able to have with the athletes has been a game changer.
That's a real good way of looking at it, man. Because I think there's a lot of people that are like, "No, I know how to handle it when this comes," but they're putting a band-aid on. You're just in a slightly bigger prison.
Yeah.
I love that vision of like actually requiring this at a youth level of making dedicated space for it at a professional level. Awesome goal. That's not going to happen in the next year. So in the meantime, like what you do is incredible. How do people find Jason? Most people that Jason Sousa, we talk to a lot of people and they're on different socials or they have a website. What's your main mode for people to find you?
Yeah, the majority of people find me on Instagram. I try to be consistent with sharing messages on Instagram that help both athletes and parents. So the majority find me there. Jason A Sousa on Instagram. I also have a website which is getyourmentaledge.com,
Okay.
because the company I run, or the coaching program I have, is Mental Edge Athletics. So getyourmentaledge.com as well is where a lot of people find me, but the majority I would say would be on Instagram, where I get a lot of outreach.
Love it. I wrote a couple of questions down because there's the selfish part of me as an athlete, still athlete, that just was curious of what to ask you. So I'm going to rattle off just like two or three if that's cool.
Go ahead.
When it comes to mindset training, is there a specific difference between team sports and individual sports with students or kids that you work with that you would say going into it, or is it really the same foundations?
Yeah, no, I would say the ones who are participating in an individual sport certainly need a lot more support through that process, right? Because it's, in terms of the setbacks and the failures, it just seems so much more because it's just you there on
On an
your own.
island, yeah,
You're on an island, right? I really recognize that pretty quickly with the tennis players or the golf players that I have, or uh, the track runners that I have. It's completely different, right? Yeah, you're on an island where, on a team setting you can still rely on others. You still get into situations where you're stuck in your head and you feel like you're on
yeah.
an island, right? But it is a little bit different from that perspective.
Second thing now for coaches, would you recommend to really start to dive into this at a youth level? Coaches start doing this uh, during practice and pull kids aside, or would you have dedicated time outside of practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for some of these bigger organizations, having a mental performance coach on staff that comes in and works with different teams that from a different angle, depending on the ages. Like I do think there's going to be ages where this is too young, right? Like sometimes I'll get parents that reach out to me that say, "Hey, my kid's really struggling mentally. Can you help?" And I ask, "How old is your child?" And they're like, "They're 8 years old." I'm like, "Your kid needs to have fun and develop. Like this is a conversation, right?"
Hmm.
It's like, I don't know if to give the kid a hug or to call his agent, right? It's like,
Yeah,
just relax, right? In terms of, if you're in an environment where he's not having fun at 8 years old, that's probably not the right environment,
right.
right? And so
Yeah,
you need to be very mindful of that. But I think some of these bigger sports organizations who have the resources, especially now with some of the fees that they're charging, have someone on staff who can really help these kids on the mental side of the game. It used to be a luxury, and now it's becoming essential at the
yeah,
younger ages.
like a necessity. And then let's say coach small town wants to start to weave this in just to show parents, do you have a recommendation of like what question should they ask first just to kind of dip their toes in it and get used to it? What question should they ask, or what exercise should they do just to start with these kids?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that also leads me to a lot of coaches have asked me to put together some type of coaching resource, which is certainly in the plans.
If you're curious about that, throw it in the comments. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in terms of having a coaching resource, there's a lot of coaches who sincerely want to do a great job with these kids, and so I'm very appreciative of that. And as you know, some of these volunteer coaches, God bless them, they're the ones that make the game go. But in terms of the one piece I would say to the coaches is and to the parents as well, is be very mindful of the way that you speak to the kids, because that ends up becoming the way that they speak to themselves, and the
Mm.
way that they speak to themselves ends up becoming the way they see themselves. And so very, very mindful of the way that you speak to the kids, I would say, is the number one thing.
Is there anything you can do to be mindful? Like, would you just say it's a deep breath before you start talking? Because it's like, man, that's easy for you to say right now. And I love my dad to death, who was my coach, and I was a goalie. But it's like after a 4 goal game and you get in that car, it's probably easy to jump. You know what I mean? Like, what is there any step right before being mindful?
Yeah, don't speak right after a game, I would say, would be the biggest one. Wait till you get home. It gives you enough time to kind of reflect and have the athlete reflect. I tell this to the parents and to your dad as well. Like I have 4 kids and they play sports, and I won't coach them because as a parent, it's so hard to make that separation, right?
Hmm.
In terms of the emotional attachment. And where I think a lot of parents struggle is, and you're a father as well, you see the full potential or the greatest potential of your kids before they ever do,
Hmm.
and you just want so badly for them to reach it because you see it for them, and sometimes you want it more than they want it for themselves. And I think that's where it creates a lot of tension. It's like, I'm trying to push you to what I see, right? And oftentimes that it can help if you're pushing in terms of character building, but in terms of external benchmarks and teams that you have to play for and wins and goals, and that starts to create a lot of tension between the athlete and the parent.
Yeah, I got emotional as you said that. Thank you. The last one's uncomfort zone. What you're talking about, I think is so crucial, is so needed. I agree. I think every team should have something like this, a resource like yourself, that worksheet, that workbook you were talking about, or have your kids go to you. But again, you are talking about something that could rub some people the wrong way. Like, how dare you tell me that I need to do this, and it's tough. It's uncomfortable putting yourself out there. You found a lot of success. Um, what Why did you decide to get uncomfortable, and get this message out there?
Yeah, I would say it's for what I use with the way that I coach my athletes is something that I've implemented in my life as well, and it has changed my life as well, right? And it's to say it's not me that is seeking the comfort; it was my mind that was always seeking the comfort, and making that separation. Realize like, hey,
Mm,
I understand why you want comfort, right? You're built for survival. Your goal is to keep me small so you feel safe and you don't have to go into the unknown, right? And so it is not you, right? And sometimes we are so stuck in our head that we forget to listen to that other voice that's inside of us, has always been inside of us.
mm.
And that part of you, my I tell all the athletes, and I think this is true for most people know what they have to do, but having the courage and the discipline to do it is where they get stuck, right?
I mean, yeah, and that answers my. That's a really efficient answer, because my next one is like, why do you think other people don't get outside their comfort zone? I ask everybody, and it's because they're listening to their mind and not the self.
They're completely misidentified with their mind, right? And if you are completely misidentified with your mind is built for survival. You're always looking for things to be fearful of, right? And the mind is, even from the perspective of sports, if you think about it, life in sports is completely uncertain, right?
Mhm.
And the mind craves certainty, and you can see the paradox about that, right? And so in the world of sports, when the mind doesn't know what's going to happen, it often will project worst case scenarios so that it feels a level of comfort, and then that becomes a thing that triggers the athlete, and it becomes a thing that they try to avoid, which becomes self-fulfilling. And you can see how the mind plays tricks on us and how it impacts performance, but also in terms of how we approach life.
Then, final question: what do you think is one simple step? Someone that's looking to get outside their comfort zone, which means they're looking to get towards uncertainty, which means they're looking to get towards self and away from mind. What's one small step they could take to start doing that?
Yeah, is to hear the mind, know that it's not you, and take action despite of it, so
Hmm.
that you start to win that internal battle. So
Ooh,
that the mind realizes, hey, wait a minute, okay, this person is no longer listening to me. And once you start taking action despite what the mind says, you start to develop a new identity, which changes the way that you think, changes the way that you behave, and ultimately changes the results that you have. And that's the deeper transformation I'm looking for.
damn! I even think someone that's like, let's say you're trying to eat healthier. It's like the mind's like, oh, you're driving past Burger King, just to be like, no, I'm going to keep driving. That small win is like, well, I'm separate than what just told me to turn right.
100%. You're absolutely right. And think about it, even from the push-ups, right? I'm trying to get 30, right? I'm at 29, and my mind's saying, "No, you did 29. That's good." It's like, no, right? I'm getting to 30, right? I say 30 because I'm on a podcast, but I'm not doing 30, right? It just sounded better. But
That's more.
yeah, but that's it, right? Every time you win that battle against your mind, and you realize, hey, that thing was trying to hold me down. I'm bigger than that.
Mm.
Okay. And it's a small win. And stacking small wins, it ends up being big changes.
Yeah. God, I love that. Okay, and then last I have to do, small plug. You've come in, you've grown your business, you've done extremely well. You've had big months. You're now growing. You're doing an entire course where these kids get to come and interact with other kids, with group learnings and all that. What's one of the biggest things you've learned coming through Leaders Inner Circle program to grow your own business, to get this message to more people?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was questioning what I believed was possible.
Mm,
Really, I think that's the biggest takeaway coming in here. And we have so many limiting beliefs based on our conditioning and based on the way that we were raised, or even from the people that we hang out with most. And all of a sudden, being with a group of people who are just so open minded, and had big goals, and that's motivating. But also seeing people who have done it
hmm.
and we're able to mentor you, right? Just, I would say the biggest thing is getting around people who have done it. It will change what you believe is possible, and then you'll start taking action on based on that new belief.
And there's so much commonalities between building the business and growing in sports. And I'm so excited as you continue to grow this, and these young student athletes and um, college athletes, professional athletes get to be around each other, man. Coach Jason Sousa, it has been a pleasure to speak with you. I could talk to you for much longer, but I'm going to keep it short, sweet, to the point. And we talked about being a leading voice, being a seeing that there's a better way, and being the person that's willing to get the rocks thrown at you to be the voice for the people that believe in
Yeah.
what you believe. And we talked about the bar is constantly being raised for young athletes. So this is something that they have to really get a good foundation with. There's more distractions now. We're treating youth sports as professional. There's more pressure. So these kids need this stuff. And one of the ways that we can help as parents, as coaches, is through our language, right? You said something along the lines of language is creative, not descriptive, right? And when you
True.
get creative with it, it leads to freedom. We talked about, man, greatness being exactly who you are, and sports is just a way for you to express it. We talked about how you are not your mind craving certainty, and small things you can do to ease into uncertainty. If you all like this was incredible for me. Show us by throwing a like and subscribing and a comment below. If you have questions, this guy is clearly intelligent. Drop your questions below. He'll answer them. If you want to get to know him more, we're going to put his links in the description below as well for his Instagram, his website, so you can reach out and see if this makes sense for your young student athlete. All I want to say is, man, Coach Jay, you're the man. Thank you so much for this podcast, my friend.
No, I loved it, man. Hopefully, this is the first of many conversations between you and I.
I am full on ready for that. You can come be our beer league mental coach next week. Speaking of the weeks to come, we will have more podcasts to come. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.